defining a motor skill, the use of a continuum is valid because it is more accurate to place a skill on a scale between two characteristics rather than classify it as one or the other. A football kick is defined as a more discrete skill rather than a continuous, due to there's a clear beginning and end to the movement, but can be described as a sequential skill due to multiple kicks being completed during a period of play. It is also classified as a more gross motor skill rather than a fine skill, because of the large amounts of muscle mass being used to perform the movement. The kick can also be described as an open motor skill rather than a closed motor skill, due to the changing requirements of the skill and the variable environment that it's performed in. Classifying the skill using Gentile's taxonomy describes it as a 4D skill. This is because it involves object manipulation, body transport, being in motion when performing the skill, and intertrial variability. A 4D skill is the hardest skill to perform. There are 5 distinct phases that make up the movement of kicking. The first is the approach phase. These are the initial steps taken prior to the kick. These can be taken at walking pace right through to sprinting. The second phase is the backswing. This is when the kicking leg is drawn back past the stability leg in preparation for forward movement. The third phase is the transition phase. This is when the kicking thigh starts to rotate towards the ball. This is the initial stage in forward movement. The forward swing phase begins when the knee starts to extend. This is when the majority of lower leg velocity is gained. This stage is completed when contact with the ball is made. The follow through is the final stage of kicking. This is when the leg is rotated up and away from the body. This can depend on the style of kick being performed. The key coaching points of kicking are the ball drop, contact position, lower leg speed, and backspin. The ball drop involves the grip on the ball, the height of the ball is released, and the angle that it is released. The ball is guarded by one hand when the other is used for balance. Kicking position refers to where the ball contacts the foot. This should be just out from the body where the swinging leg is at its fastest point. Toes should be pointed to create a solid contact point. Lower leg speed is what gives the kick its power. This is achieved through hip flexion and knee extension. Backspin refers to the action of the ball after it has left the foot. When spinning backwards, the ball gains a straighter flight path and more distance. It is also easier to catch and predict. Kicking performance will be tested pre and post training, as well as a retention test 2 weeks post training. This will involve 10 kicks to stationary targets from 2 different distances. A score will be given based on the amount of accurate kicks made. These kicks will also undergo qualitative assessment based on the key components of kicking. Each component will be scored out of 10. Transfer testing will take place at the end of the training period. This will test the ability for the learner to apply kicking skill to game situations. A goal kicking test will be completed and score based on goals and points kicked. A kick to a random moving target will be used to test the ability of the learner to identify, react, and successfully perform a kick in a short space of time. This will be scored on accurate kicks.
It is important to target particular stages of learning when attempting to teach a new skill. During weeks 1 to 3, the learner is expected to be in the cognitive stage of learning, as they would experience numerous amounts of errors and would still be getting a feel for both kinetic and kinematic aspects of performing a drop punt. Here the learner will be assisted in understanding the key elements of the skill and will be provided with feedback from sources such as augmented feedback. For the remaining weeks 3 to 6, the learner is likely to transit to the associative stages of learning, where they would begin to understand how components of the skill are related during execution and would actively make adjustments to the movement during the performance of a skill. It is unlikely that the learner would progress into the autonomous stage within a 6-week program, as it is unlikely that they could perform the skill with infrequent errors without requiring much attention to the task by then. During the training period, feedback and verbal instruction can be used to assist the learner greatly. These cues contain performance-related information that adds to intrinsic information, such as proprioception. It is important that verbal cues given during the training period are both brief and accurate in nature. Instructions should be kept not only short and sharp, but also mindful of the experience of the learner, so as not to use language that may confuse them. Additionally, these cues should be timed correctly, given as soon as possible in explicit and clear language immediately after performing the skill if needed. Augmented feedback can be used as additional information to intrinsic feedback, such as proprioception or visual feedback, to increase the efficiency of learning. This feedback should be comprised of knowledge of results, which can be seen as the outcome of the learner's performance, or knowledge of performance, which is given as information on the characteristics and patterns of movement which led to the outcome. Additionally, information such as video feedback can be used to enhance learning. Fading of knowledge of results and knowledge of performance should be used, where feedback is much more frequently given early in practice and reduced gradually to avoid learner dependence on external feedback so that they can perform the skill successfully with only using intrinsic information. Both extrinsic and intrinsic motivation are utilized to keep the learner focused and motivated for success. This should include SMART goal setting, where the learner can set both short-term, which can be seen as weekly goals, and long-term goals that are based on the mastery of the skill. Prior learning of a skill may influence the learning of a new skill both positively and negatively. In this case, there is a potential for previous soccer players learning the AFL kick to have a transfer of learning, where there are similarities in kicking technique already embedded in the individual. This can be beneficial to the learner as it may lead to reductions in transition time between stages of learning. Alternatively, this can be detrimental to the learner's progress, as differences between optimal kicking styles between the sports may carry over and negatively affect learning. The skill will be demonstrated to the learner prior to the learner attempting it, though no explicit instruction or feedback about the skill is to be given until after the skill has been attempted. This will ensure the learner can learn implicitly, finding a natural technique that will work for them. High frequency, low duration sessions are to be used. With 4 30-minute sessions a week, distributed practice is preferential to massed, and has been previously shown to yield higher amounts of retention. Blocked practice is also suitable over random, as the individual is still a beginner and may not be experienced enough for randomly distributed practice as of yet. Part practice is used in the initial few weeks of the program, with a focus on individual components of the skill, which is then progressed to whole practice more frequently later on. During the early stages of the program, attentional focus should remain narrow in a closed environment so that the learner can focus more so on performing the skill itself and developing a feel for its components and intricacies. In comparison, the later stages, where the learner would require less attention to the skill performance, should be practiced in a more open environment with a broad focus so that they can get used to completing the skill in situations where they must pay attention to other aspects of the situation.
Don't even have to be brave. Living in a gilded cage, the only risk is that you go. these days. With every path you take, you know you're safe, safe, safe. The only risk is that you'll go insane. The only risk is that